Hey, it's Mike from MD Airsoft. In this video I'm going to show you how to open a version 2 gearbox and briefly explain the parts names and what everything does briefly. This gearbox is out of a VFC SCAR, so don't worry about these if yours looks different. If yours is an M4 type, these will have like a longer wire with your battery connection, or your wires will be coming out of the front to go to the foregrip. So to start off, you're going to want to remove these screws, and when I come back, those screws will be done. And just removing the last screw here. Now after we remove this screw, the gearbox should stay closed on its own. That's always a good idea, just to kind of keep a hand on it just in case it doesn't explode. You can take, next step is actually opening it. Now on most airsoft gearboxes there'll be a hole here. What you want to do is take, this is my punch that I use, or you can take a small screwdriver, whatever works for you. Stick it in that hole and then tilt it up and press down. What that is going to do is make sure that that spring stays in place and that nothing flies out at you. Okay, so just slowly take the shell off the top. Okay, now with your other hand just kind of push down and then lift up on the spring until it is removed. And now the gun is safe, it's not going to explode anymore or anything like that. Now if your gun doesn't have a hole in the back of the gearbox, you're going to I don't know why I always say that. You're going to want to take a flathead and just kind of pry it open enough to stick that screwdriver in, and then the same way. You find that without a hole on the cheaper end guns, lower quality guns. So this is what the inside of your gearbox looks like. You have your gear set, your cylinder, piston, cylinder head. That's where all your compression goes. Your tappet plate here, which moves the nozzle. Trigger unit, the actual trigger. This right here is your safety. Okay, so motor goes in here. It spins this gear, which is called the bevel gear. It then turns this gear here, which is the spur gear. Looks like a spur on a cowboy's boot. And then the spur gear spins the sector gear, which moves the tappet plate back, and as well as moves the piston to compress the spring. And as you can see, I'm gonna pick up my little tool here. It's only got half teeth here, so when the piston clears this last tooth, the spring then slams the piston forward, creating that air that you need to move the BB out of the barrel. So to remove all these parts, it's pretty simple. You just pick them up. Now you want to make sure, if it's your first time opening gearbox, you kind of watch where your shims are. Now for the most part, the higher end guns are shimmed pretty decent out of the factory, but you know, some guns could need improvement. Okay, this is your anti-reversal latch. What that does is make sure that when the gears spin, they only spin in one direction, and they're not going to release the tension and spring off backwards. So to remove this whole unit, just pop up this spring and then the whole unit will come out. Okay, and lift up the sector gear. As you can see, there was a shim, so I'm going to put it back on. Set it to the side. And the spur gear. Now if you wanted to remove the trigger, you can. You just lift up. There is a spring underneath it, as you can see there. Now normally you never remove these three pieces: the cutoff lever, the actual trigger, and the safety. The only time you would do this is to remove the safety is if you need to put a new selector plate on. Obviously to replace the trigger There's 3 screws, one for its own individual part, one for the cutoff lever, one for the trigger unit, and one for the safety. So if you want to remove these things, you just remove these 3 and take them off. So how do you put it back together? Well, obviously it's opposite of how you took it off. I start with spur gear and the sector gear. Now make sure that your teeth are pointing down, so that when you put this whole unit in, it's not going to hit the piston or anything like that. So just kind of hold the spring, kind of tilt it forward and then rock it back. These holes here will fit on the nubs in the front of the gearbox. And if the spring's giving you a hard time, you can just take it off and put it in later. Okay, the piston's in. Now you want to take this cylinder and just kind of push it forward and then down. If it's not in the right spot, it's going to affect the motion, the track of the piston. So take the spring, loop it around this little hook on the tappet plate. Take your punch or screwdriver, pop it on there, test it, it's returning. Then take your anti-reversal latch and just verify that the spring's in the right position. Hold it back with one finger and then pop in the bevel gear with the other. Okay, you can kind of give it a turn, you hear that click, that's in a good spot. Now this is going to be where you have the most difficulty if this is your first time putting a gearbox back together. Before you put it back together, you want to check your air seal. Now with the spring in, put your finger over the nozzle and move your piston back and forth. Now there should be almost zero, the piston should kind of spring but not go all the way forward. The more resistance you have, the better air seal you have, and that won't affect your FPS. So to put this trigger back on, there's a little window in there. That's where this little piece here goes. This can be a little bit tricky too. You kind of want to hold it. You kind of hold it with your thumb, pop it into place. Now the other spring, the other part of it's hanging out of the gearbox. You want to lift that up and then push it down so that's on the inside of the gearbox underneath the safety lever. So again, to put the spring back in, you start off like this. It's almost the exact same way you want to take it out, but requires a little more patience. So you push out, I should mention too that these little nubs here actually sit in the gearbox in the notch. So you want to push it in and then get that seated in the notch, and then again tilt up, push down, and then put the cover back on. Now if it doesn't go on, hold it with your hand. Sometimes the gears don't quite line up, so that's okay. You can sometimes just take in the back of the screwdriver, tapping it will put it back into place. Sometimes it won't. In most cases, your anti-reversal kind of moved out of place. So I'm still having trouble. Another tip you can do, and if I push on my tappet plate, see how it just snapped down? It just got stuck. Now, if the tappet plate's moving, you might want to move the actual, hold the back of the gearbox, and it just snapped in again, and move the actual piston. The piston rides in the track. Sometimes it's not completely in the track. So now that the gearbox closed, you can verify your trigger, verify your nozzle moving, and simply just put the screws back in. So I hope this has been helpful. Again, this is how you take apart a version 2 gearbox and how you put it back together. This is Mike from MD Airsoft. Thanks for watching.